It is the scheduled time for this meeting and we have a quorum. And I'll call to order the special meeting of the House Committee. There is only one item on the agenda. Update on the government's overall efforts and the relevant measures to combat COVID-19. First, may I now invite the administration to join us. Members, please remain quiet. This special meeting is to allow us an occasion for the Chief Secretary for Administration, 9 Directors of Bureau, the Chief Executive of the Hospital Authority and other government officials to give us an update on the government's overall efforts and relevant measures to combat COVID-19. They are here to answer members' questions. I know members have concerns about other incidents in the community, but the host committee is not the forum for you to disrupt order, so we're not able to proceed with our meeting. Can I ask members to stop shouting? Can I ask members to stop shouting? I've already given you a warning. Members, please stop shouting. Otherwise, as the chairperson, I have the responsibility to conduct this meeting. I have to make sure the meeting is conducted in an orderly manner. Ms. Claudia Mo, Dr. Kokaki, Mr. Dennis Kwok, Mr. Lam Chak Ting, Mr. Yip Kin Yuen, members, please, first, stop shouting. I note that you have already stopped shouting. And secondly, as I mentioned just now, there is only one item on the agenda today, and that is the update on the government's overall efforts and the relevant measures to combat COVID-19. So this is the opportunity for members to ask questions of the government. Now, both members and the general public are very much concerned about this issue. So please remove all slogans that are not relevant to this item today. So please remove all these placards. Otherwise, I will ask the security staff to take away the placards from you. Dr. Kwokake, Mr. Jeremy Tam, Ms. Claudia Mo, please remove the exhibits. Mr. James Toh, what is your point of order? Well, we're talking about the epidemic effort, and the gathering ban is also a form of political persecution. There are many possibilities with regard to political persecution. We may have questions about that. Now, because making use of the gathering ban to prosecute people is a form of political prosecution, while those signs that you're showing have nothing to do with the item under discussion today. So please put away your exhibit so we could conduct our meeting in an orderly manner. Please observe the order of this meeting. As the chairperson, I would like to make the most of the meeting time we have today, and I understand members are keen to ask questions. Please, can I ask for your cooperation? Now, many members have expressed concern about the latest progress of government's effort in combating COVID-19, and also they're concerned about the health code and other measures that affect businesses and the public. Now, as the issues straddle many different policy areas, so I have already written to the Chief Secretary of Administration, and he's agreed to lead all relevant government officials to join us today. Now, the meeting will end at 4:30 p.m. today. Now, can I invite members who wish to speak to press the request to speak button? As I decide on the order for members to speak, I will have regard to the number of questions raised by individual members at previous special House Committee meetings. Now, and then I'll go by the order of the pressing of the buttons, political affiliations, and deciding in order. The relevant paper has been submitted by the administration for members' reference, and I understand members have issued various documents today. I have already passed on these documents to the administration for consideration. First of all, I would like to welcome the Chief Secretary for Administration and his team for joining us today. Now, the Chief Secretary is leading many directors of bureau, deputy directors, undersecretary, and representatives of the Home Hospital Authority to attend this meeting. I will first invite the Chief Secretary to make some brief opening remarks, and then the floor will be open to questions by members. Because we want to allow as many members to speak as possible, so I will limit each member to 3 minutes. That includes both questions and answers. There will be a transcript of verbatim record of the meeting today. Chief Secretary, Mr. Lam Cheuk Ting, do you have a point of order? Can you tell us about the order of speaking for members? Well, the clerk is now working on that. We are following the convention of the House Committee. We'll have regard to the number of questions raised by members at previous special meetings. We'll also consider your political affiliation, so we'll give you the order later. Mr. Leung Yu Chung, do you have a point of order? Yes, I have a point of order. You say the meeting will end at 4:30. Will the meeting be extended? Well, I have the discretion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes. So far, 52 members have pressed the request to speak button. So I will probably exercise my discretion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes unless the Chief Secretary for Administration is unable to stay behind for another 15 minutes. Can you do that, Chief Secretary? Yes, I can. So now can I invite the Chief Secretary to make some brief opening remarks on the latest anti-epidemic effort of the government. Actually, the administration has given us detailed papers, so please be brief, Chief Secretary. Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, may I say that we are most grateful to you for arranging the special meeting. On the 11th of August, the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress made the decision that the current legislature will extend for another year, and this is the first formal meeting since that decision. I would like to thank members for attending the meeting, and that shows the importance of the executive legislature relations. Now you see there are 9 directors of bureau and other colleagues attending the meeting here today. It shows that we attach great importance to any opportunities to have exchanges with you. Since early July, we've seen the third wave of the epidemic involving mostly community infection. Now, the figures, the daily number of new cases per day has dropped since the peak in early July, but then we're still seeing daily cases. And then for many of the cases, we're unable to identify the sources of infection, and that is a cause of concern. The epidemic is still not under control, so we must not let down our guard. Under the suppress and lift principle, in the light of the third wave of transmission, the government has implemented a series of measures, and they are the most stringent so far. And then last week we submitted a very detailed paper over 30 tens of pages to give you all the details. So I'll just highlight some of the key points here. First of all, on boundary control measures, we're fully aware of the public and health risks posed by cross-boundary travels. But then at the same time, we need to make sure that our daily necessities are not affected because we need supplies from across the boundary. So for people, for the general travelers, there is a need for quarantine arrangement, but then there are air crews and other people who need to travel between the two places, between Hong Kong and the mainland and so on, so we need to give them exemption. And then we have also expanded our testing scope. The purpose is to achieve early detection, identification, early isolation, and early treatment. So far, we have done over 350,000 tests. And then since early July, we have done over 950 tests. And since mid-July, we have started a targeted group testing scheme by phases for the higher risk groups, and that covered more than 1 million people. And then with the strong support of the Central People's Government, we're going to launch the Universal Community Testing Program. It will allow the general public to take one free test. The program starts from the 1st of September for 7 days, and there may be extension of another 7 days, but no more. I would like to appeal to members to take part actively in the program for the good of yourselves and your family members, and also for the good of Hong Kong. Now, if we could test more people, we will be able to identify silent carriers sooner, and then we could cut the transmission chain that will help to stabilize the epidemic, and then we could resume normal activities. I must stress that the scheme is just to test COVID-19, and all the tests are carried out in Hong Kong. The specimens and personal information will not be sent outside of Hong Kong, and the specimens and the information will be destroyed after a certain period of time, so there's no need to worry about the leak of personal data. Another thing is that at Disneyland by Penny's Bay, we're going to set up testing another quarantine center. Now, if all goes well, hopefully by the end of the year, we could return Chung Yuen Estate to the housing department. And so by the end of the year, we're able to provide 3,300 quarantine units. And also to relieve the pressure on hospitals at the Lei Yue Moon Holiday Camp and the Asia World Expo, the hospital authority will be setting up community treatment facilities. With the strong support of the Central People's Government, the treatment facilities at AWE will be further expanded. To prepare ourselves for another possible wave of transmission, we're going to build a 2-story temporary hospital next to the Asia World Expo with the strong support of the Central People's Government. The facilities could be completed by the end of the year, and by then we will have 2,700 beds. And procurement of vaccines is important. There is keen competition around the world. We are adopting a two-pronged approach to actively follow on that. We are going to join the COVAX facility led by the WHO, so that we were able to procure vaccines. We'll also be purchasing vaccines from manufacturers directly. And then with the support of the Central People's Government, we have asked that they give us support in the procurement of vaccine. Now, with the continuous epidemic, it's dealt an unprecedented blow to the economy in Hong Kong. The government has launched the Anti-Epidemic Fund, and there are also various relief measures announced in the budget. The government has already plowed in over $220 billion. By mid-August, there are 33 items under the Anti-Epidemic Fund, and a total of $78 billion have been disbursed. Now, there will be a new round of the Anti-Epidemic Fund. I, together with the Financial Secretary and other directors of Bureau, are working hard to listen to the views of different sectors. We expect Hong Kong to face immense pressure in our economic development, and also we probably will record the highest deficit figure this financial year. So we need to act prudently, but at the same time we need to draw up suitable measures so we could give assistance to businesses, employees, and all others who've been affected by the epidemic. And then finally, under the suppress and lift strategy, we will have regard to the latest epidemic development, and then we will gradually resume various economic and social activities. Now, for certain premises, such as beauty parlors and cinemas, they are opening today. And then for catering business, dining services has resumed for the evening until 9 p.m. And of course, there'll be a limit of 2 persons per table. Now, it's possible that there could be another wave of transmission during the flu season and the winter, so we must remain highly vigilant. We appeal to the public to continue to observe various personal hygiene measures, and then we will adjust our measures in an appropriate manner in the light of the latest epidemic situation. We want to strike a proper balance between public health needs as well as economic needs. And now we're here to listen to your views. Thank you. May I remind members, please note that you should turn your phone to a silent mode. I just heard a phone ringing just now. Now, 53 members have indicated they wish to speak. We have a tight schedule, so I have already set a time limit of 3 minutes. So please be concise in your questions. Within the 3 minutes, it will be for both questions and answers. Mr. Wong Kwok Kim, please.
And Chairman, it's nice to see the Pen Democrats returning to the House Committee and acknowledging the constitutionality of the House Committee. I welcome that all members would fight the epidemic together and do something for the livelihood. A question for the Chief Secretary. While we're fighting the pandemic, another question is about the economy. A lot of the workers, besides worrying about the virus, also worry about their livelihood. A lot of industry are on the lifeline. While the employment support scheme is supposed to protect the employees, where the pay will be subsidized for 50% or the maximum of $9,000. From what I know, that the companies joining the ESS, regardless of number of days to work, the employees should at least get half a month pay. I heard some public officers claiming to contradict this principle. I wonder if I misunderstood. I hope in this occasion I would like the government to make it clear that for each employee you working for a company applying for ESS, we get half a month pay. A lot of the companies, especially in the catering sector, while they have so many no-pay leaves, they'll probably work for 10 or days or 7 weeks in a month. So how do they get paid? How the government get it right, not to cause confusion? Who will take the answer? I'll take Mr. Lau Chi-kwang, Secretary for Labor Welfare, to take the question. The whole employment support scheme, ESS, to the employer, after applying for the subsidy, all the subsidy should be passed on to the employees. As for the pay for individual staff, there's no arrangement on the ESS or with any scrutiny on that. Well, Secretary, when it comes to a scenario where they get the money or the subsidy, while the management will get paid a lot, while the grassroots only get paid $2,000 to $3,000, or maybe just 7 days pay for a month. Well, would the government intend to see this happening? Well, Chairperson, of course, we don't want to see this arrangement. For the whole scheme, we have no individual staff particulars, and whether they work full-time or part-time, and their past and current pay. We do not collect such information. Joseph Lee. Well, after looking at the government's paper today, I'm quite worried. I wonder if I should trust them. Now that the government had become Joe Gao and claiming black is white, you really mean what you said? Is it as good as what you claimed? Well, like Mr. Wong Kwok Kim said, for the whole Anti-Epidemic Fund, for all kind of subsidy and incentive scheme, the grassroots have failed to benefit. We have saving the employees but not the staff. While the rent are still climbing, a lot of them could not afford the rent and forced to close. Well, excluding the arbitrary arrests and other political operations. Well, while not trusting the measures for the expert opinion, well, they have been silenced or intimidated. So how we carry out the anti-epidemic measures, whether for social distancing or for the testing, well, for any dissenting opinion, and you call them so-called experts and thought that therefore they weren't there to speak up, while you claim to have indicators and able to capture the silent carriers in the community, should I trust you for this? Or you seem saying the other way around and turning black into white? Well, you have allocated $4.7 billion to hospital authority. I don't know how to spend the money. Well, a lot of the HA staff not able to get this subsidy and ran out of supplies. Should I take your word for it? Chief Secretary, of the problems you claim, can you just answer one? For the third wave, because you do a poor job in closing our border with so many loopholes and too many exempted categories. That's why we have so many imported cases, which overwhelm our frontline staff and also community outbreaks, and with so many deaths. Are your measures able to prevent from a fourth or the fifth wave? Well, the experts claim there will be higher toll for fourth and fifth. Well, I'm a scholar myself. Well, I wonder if we will silence them and not trusting them. I hope that the Secretary answered the question first. Secretary, well, fighting the epidemic will require all hands on deck. We can't let the politics above public health. We have to put science first. This virus is indiscriminate. There's no political affiliation. It's also a very cunning virus. The COVID-19 is very virus. It's cunning. As we should take it seriously and put our hands together for the common purpose to contain the virus. After containing the epidemic, our lives can resume to normal. And all the allowances. So there are only 15 seconds left. I believe that as the government being cunning instead of us, you are putting politics above science and disregard the expert opinion. We'll also respect the expert opinion. We'll also take a scientific-based approach. The expert opinion will take this very seriously. Ms. Paul Chair, first declaration interest. My law firm and travel agency will benefit from the ESS and also the SME financing and also the subsidy scheme for travel agents. While the Chief Secretary claimed they always spend $290 billion, we'll need to spend more. From what we see that you are throwing money indiscriminately. For the ESS scheme, they have companies taking the money and yet there's still layoffs, and yet those with zero headcounts still able to get the subsidy. Or the major corporations are enjoying so much subsidy or very profitable, as we know that the Hawker Sanatorium is doing such good business, or the shopping site have been doing so well, and yet they're getting 86 million or 30 million as subsidies. Some of them already been subsidized. For example, the MPF trustees also get a double benefit and also get money plus they're guaranteed of profit. And all these perks have give the public impression this is just not pragmatic. Or I raised many times with the secretary, they should be doing more practical. If the government ran out of money and doesn't have enough time or can't benefit everyone, can we do something on the MPF? So why can't we take out our MPF balance? Our biggest party, the DAB, have also agreed to my position. And also, what for the pandemics, and also in other side political spectrum also support my position. Can the government at least look into this proposal, or at least ask the MPF trustee? Not everyone would need to withdraw the MPF saving. Well, taking out their own MPF contribution was the most direct measure, and that will not prevent any misuse money or fraud. At least you can check how many say would withdraw and whether it is feasible. That can be done quite quickly. I hope you can consider it. Second, on the ASS, we could look at Singapore. They will have very tough penalty, and also they will calculate based on that MPF. They not require declaration by the employer, and also prevent abuse, and also on calculate based on their past record. It is something we should take on board. Well, we can actually benefit more. For example, we can hand out another $10,000 for everyone. Well, Mr. Paul Chair's idea allowed the employees to withdraw part of the MPF contribution. I thank the DAB for raising this idea. I've been talking to it for a better half of the year. Of course, the DAB always the smartest. I'm not fighting for the credit. Well, you claim that you've been the first time hearing about this, we have never listened. No wonder you claim that dishwashing is a decent job. Please, members, allow the administration to respond. I did really undercut your credit. Please. The DAB have come up with a concrete proposal. Well, your idea is noted as well. Well, I suppose that you both are full of wisdom. We're willing to consider it. whether it's feasible. We do quite some study. At this stage, I couldn't promise you whether we can go ahead. Well, two questions. ESS and the cash handout. Would you have a chance to answer? We're way past 3 minutes. Mr. Wang Ting Kwong. First, glad to see everyone here is in good health. Well, for ourselves and others, I appeal to Hong Kong public to proactively take part of the universal community testing scheme. The testing have great implications. We support the Hong Kong government with fighting the epidemic, and we thank the Central People's Government for offering logistic and personnel support. I'm concerned that after this UCTP, would the health codes and other relevant measures to go ahead? If the health code were able to tie in with the flow of people in the Greater Bay Area, a lot of the companies in the GBA for a greater half the year are not able to return to their businesses. For the industry, they asked me repeatedly when the health code can be launched, allow them to cross the border. They're very concerned and anxious about this. I receive a lot of phone calls about this daily. What solution can government offer? After the UCTP, would you launch the health code and also discuss with the Guangdong and Macau? Secretary, well, before the outbreak of the third wave, what the health code have also finished all the technicality study is supposed to be launched. No wonder before the launch we had the third wave and we have to put the brakes on it. Well, with joint infection control, if Hong Kong's situation is unstable, then the health code is unworkable. That's why we put the brake on it. Until the Hong Kong is stabilized, then we can reactivate it. While the foundation is clear, we have consensus on all three sides. As soon as the situation stabilizes and Hong Kong is under control, we have confidence that the health code can be implemented right away. We have all the details. I would like that Mr. Alfred Sit to give a brief overview. Mr. Sit. Well, for May and June, the health code for boundary crossing was almost ready. Like the Secretary said, as soon as the pandemic became stable, would facilitate Hong Kong residents can orderly go to Macau and Guangdong province. We fully understood that Hong Kong have a close link just with other GBA cities. But the boundary crossing health code is definitely ready. As soon as the epidemic is stable, then we can be launched. Hope that it can launch ASAP. Mr. Lam Chak-ting.
Can I ask the administration this? Now, as you launch a health code, how are you going to protect the privacy and personal data of the public? How can you make sure that this would not be taken without authorization? Because people are really worried that the government is going to take advantage of the health code to monitor people's movement. And without the health code, you won't be able to board public transport. You can't go into shopping malls and restaurants. Now, this is just a pilot scheme, but after the pilot scheme, when you fully implement the scheme, then are you going to impose such a comprehensive control on people's movements? Now, of course, government will say you won't do that. But then what do we know the government is best at doing is turning black into white and distorting facts. So nobody believes in what the government says because you always twist the truth. How can you instill confidence in the public then? Another question for Matthew Cheung. Now you have been the longest serving official and you are, the third wave of transmission has cost dozens of lives because you didn't close the border. Would you openly make an apology? Would the government be be accountable for the lives lost? Now, can I ask Mr. Lam Chak Ting to be more respectful in his choice of words? Now, are you the longest-serving officials in government? That's what I call a dog official. Can you clarify when you say "gao" in Cantonese? Do you mean long-serving or do you mean a dog? And can I ask members to note that members may be using a word with the same sound for to imply other meanings, but I must remind members not to insult any persons attending the meeting. So there must be mutual respect. For the health code, as I said, it will purely be for facilitating cross-boundary travels. If you don't want the government to have your information, then you can choose not to cross the boundary. So the choice is entirely yours. If you want to use the health code to cross the boundary, of course we have to pass on the information to the other authorities. Otherwise, how can we do that? Mr. Lam, please. This is the pilot scheme for now, but it may become a full-blown scheme in future. Can you give an undertaking that in future you're not going to impose any health code in Hong Kong? Can you give this undertaking? Chief Secretary, please. The pilot scheme is limited to the health code for cross-boundary travel purpose. I'm asking whether you're going to make an undertaking that you're not going to roll out the health code in Hong Kong. Do you dare to give such an undertaking? Well, you stop your time, Mr. Tam. The government has no intention at the moment to use the health code for other than cross-boundary travel purpose. So that's been made clear that the health code is for cross-boundary purpose. Mr. Holden Chow. Thank you. The Universal Community Testing Program. Of course, we are appealing to the public to actively take part in the UCTP. But I think it's directly related to the cross-boundary health code system. As the government explained just now, you're already all prepared for the health code system, but then we're seeing resurgence of the epidemic. We would like to show other places that through the UCTP that is safe in Hong Kong. Only then would there be confidence on the part of the mainland to allow the implementation of the health code. Because if this goes on any longer, there are tens of thousands of families and others who are anxious to go back to the mainland for various reasons. So I hope you will step up publicity. You have to explain things properly to the public. For the health code system, in your paper, you've explained the implementation process. All we are waiting for is a time frame. So can you tell us whether you have already got a time frame on when you will implement the health code system for cross-boundary travel? I'm just asking for a proposed timetable. Second question. The government has already launched 2 rounds of the Anti-Epidemic Fund, and we're talking about the Anti-Epidemic Fund 3.0. We've been asking for a 3rd round of the fund to give support to the public. I hope in this round you're going to give assistance to those who've been left out in the previous rounds, because there have been some sectors who've not received any help. For example, I and Mr. Leung Chi-Chong have been talking about music schools, and they have not been given any assistance so far. This is just one of the trades. And then there are others who are self-employed. And we've received views from them. Say there are those involved in performances. They're either actors, actresses, or the backstage workers, and most of them are self-employed persons. So far, you've not been able to give them much assistance. I hope, therefore, under the Anti-Epidemic Fund 3.0, you're going to give assistance to those who've been left out before, and including those who are self-employed, because there are many who are self-employed. So I would like some response there. Thank you. Health code and ESS. Now, we are anxious to start the health code scheme. As I said, before the 3rd wave of the transmission, we were almost ready to launch the health code. But then when we were about to launch it the following day, we've seen an outbreak in elderly home. Guangdong province has a consensus with us. As long as our epidemic stabilizes, then we can start the scheme. And as for the Anti-Epidemic Fund 3.0, we are listening to views. We will see what we can do to help those who've been left out before. Now, Mr. Wong Kok Kin just now criticized the Labour and Welfare Bureau, but you don't need to criticize the Labour and Welfare Bureau. You could put your own people there, like Ho Kai Ming, and then you could work things out behind closed doors. Now, the $10,000 given to the public, many have spent them because many people are unemployed or underemployed in the past few months. And so some has suggested dispersing further cash and not $10,000, $20,000. So are you going to return $20,000 to all members of the public? Now, we are here to listen to your views. We are not give you a concrete response today because we want to have meaningful interaction and exchanges here. For $10,000, it involves a huge sum of money. We know what the economy is like, what the financial position of the government is like. We are going into a dire situation. We expect, we forecast that there will be $300 billion of deficit this year. It is the largest ever. So, of course, we need to help those in need, but we need to make sure we have healthy public finances. So we need to strike a balance between the two. Now, Chief Secretary, you say you want a meaningful interaction here. Okay, if $20,000 are not possible, what about $15,000, $10,000, whatever? There's no point of you just listening to us without giving a response. Now, you say the public are suffering, but you're not suffering at all. All of you sitting over there, all of you on the other side, you all collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars in pay every month, and you work in an air-conditioned office. You don't know people actually have to work. You don't know people actually have to get meals, and you don't know that people are trying hard to pay their rent or to support their children. So shouldn't you act more quickly? For the Anti-Epidemic Fund 2.0, that's $8 billion as contingency that you can use anytime. You don't need approval from the LegCo. Have you used that $8 billion at all? Have you, Chief Secretary? For 1.0 and 2.0 together, yes, we have some contingency funds. But then, we are still rolling out various schemes or implementing various schemes under the Anti-Epidemic Fund. Only then, when we have completed all the schemes, do we know how much we have left? Right now, we can't do the calculation, but of course, we're working as quickly as we could. But then I think you have spent the bulk of the money. Please show some respect. As the Chief Secretary is speaking, please do not speak at the same time. Any other questions, please? Well, it's still my turn after all. Now, you have $8 billion in contingency fund that you can use any time, but you're not using a dime there. That is the problem. Because that money has been given to you, you can use it any time. Chief Secretary, for the contingency fund, we've used some of it, actually. For example, the Penny Bay project, there will be a 2,000 plus unit isolation facilities that cost a lot of money. We need money, so that's how we got the money from the contingency fund. And then for certain shops like businesses doing dishwashing or laundry or car repair shops, they've all been added to the scheme, and so that money also comes out of the contingency fund. Mr. Chiu Ka-chun, well, the pro-government camp's always been talking about a health code. This is the health horse. Health code and health horse sounds the same in Cantonese. But this is a horse, so it's not a deer. Anyway, before the government launched the CU mask scheme, but then I see there are 17 government officials. How many of you are wearing the CU mask? Is it because if you don't wear the mask, then the mask doesn't exist? Or is your action telling us that the CU mask is all for nothing? That's the first question. Second question. About the small catering businesses. Now you are allowing the dinner dine-in services to resume until 9 p.m. But then there are many small businesses employing people with hearing impairments and other impairments, and they're suffering a tough time. And what is most enraging is that owners are still increasing rents when the times are so bad. So how are you going to deal with that? Are you going to take a stronger position to remind or even punish landlords who increase rents when the economy is doing so poorly? And then what sort of assistance are you going to give for rental expenses? And another question, the arts and culture sector has been asking for a meeting with the relevant Director Bureau. Can I ask Mr. Casper Choi to agree to meet with the arts and culture sector so you could work out a scheme together? And today, cinemas could also reopen. Would you open other closed performing and exhibition venues so those in the sector would have a chance to showcase their work? Now, first, about rental expenses. Yes, this is something of great concern to the government. We've been appealing to the larger landlords and developers to be more understanding and try to reduce rent as far as possible, because all shops, big or small, are suffering. The government is renting out premises too, as you know. And we are already offering concessions. And for some of our tenants, we actually waive rents altogether for them. And then the MTRCL, the airport authority, they also have similar policies. So we've been appealing repeatedly to landlords and developers to help out their tenants as far as possible. Now I'll ask Mr. Casper Choi to take up the other question. Please be brief. Well, I will work out a schedule with them. In fact, in the past months, we've been in contact with the various practitioners in the various trades. If we're able to open up certain venues, or especially rehearsal venues, we've had such experience in the past few months, so I will be talking to them later. Mrs. Regina Ip. Thank you, Madam Chair. Some time ago, I received some complaints from the public. The buildings where they live in have seen infected cases, and they complained that the specimen bottles were being distributed really slowly. Many would like to do the tests quickly, but now, of course, the epidemic is a bit more under control. People may not be so keen to take the test, because taking a test once doesn't mean there's permanent immunity. So for the universal community testing program, can you explain to us what the benefits are for Hong Kong as a whole? Yes, there are benefits in that. First of all, this is a voluntary and free test. It's for your good, and for the good of the community. Why? Because we want to resume normal activities. We want to relaunch our economy. We have to therefore cut the transmission chain, in particular the silent transmission chain. If we do not do the test early, then there's no way we could cut the transmission chain. So it's for our own good too, because you may want to go shopping or go out to for meals, or you want to go to work, and then students want to resume class, and we all want to go back to normal. So it's for public good, and we must all work together on this. And we're going to step up publicity, which bringing this message out every day. So that's why I hope members will set an example, and government officials too should set an example to take the test. Secondly, about specimen bottles, well, there's something that happened in the past, so I won't spend time here. Mr. Zip, now you say you want to detect the silent carriers. You asked me who are the silent carriers, I would say they are the triad gangs. I think it was yesterday there was a news report. The police deployed over 200 police officers to crack down on illegal gambling dens. So there are various illegal operations, and those involved, of course, will not take tests. If you ask them where they've been, there's no way you can track where they have been. Even though there's a law required to do so, they will not tell you where they've been. I'm sure there are plenty of such illegal activities, and that's why we have these silent carriers in the community. And these are the transmission chains that remain. So how are you going to deal with that? Chief Secretary, well, it's about practical issues. If we're talking about underground or illegal activities, of course, it's difficult to detect such activities. But then we must remember that the virus doesn't, know anybody at all. Everybody has the same chance of getting infected. Even for people of any background, they have family members, so they should be trying to protect their family members. Yes, of course, you talk about good people; they will care about their family members, but then there are always illegal activities, and people make money from these activities, so they need to keep working in those activities. And how are you going to detect those activities, or would you encourage the public to report them? Well, of course, if there are reports, we'll follow up on that, and then we'll talk to the Security Bureau to see what more operations we can carry out.
Jimmy, well, the government's epidemic work go on all aspects, and with the support of the Central People's Government, the Hong Kong testing capability had given a great boost. We should exploit this advantage and provide more incentive and to boost the publicity for the benefit of testing to identify the silent carriers so as to cut off the transmission chain so that we can fully restart the economy. We'll notice this Paris 68 and mentioned that the government planned to take part in the COVAX facility co-led by the Gavi Vaccine Alliance and the Coalition for the Epidemic Preparedness and WHO. Even though we have determined the price for the vaccine, I notice that the participating governments would need to put a 15% down payment by mid-September. What's the government estimate of the cost or any preparedness, any allocations? Well, the government, since regardless of the final price of the vaccine, they'll be freely available to the public so everyone can get vaccinated. Secretary Sophie Chan. Thank you, Mr. Ng. Question. For the procurement of the vaccines, we pay a lot of attention to it. The virus will stay with us for quite a while. Besides having the vaccine, or effective vaccine rather, and to improve the situation, so we are really working in full steam. For your question, we'll take a double-pronged approach. The first, that we have decided to participate in a COVAX facility, which we will good purchase that probably secure 20% of the vaccine, 20% of the cover 20% of the Hong Kong population, and that the scientific committee under the DH would suggest everyone in Hong Kong to get vaccinated. What the price has been fluctuating, so we're not able to give an accurate estimate. The government have allocated enough money for this because we are supposed to pay within a short time. And also, for any potential vaccine, of course, we have to go through, obtain the data and the assessment by the scientific committees under the Department of Health. And we would find out from the vaccine developers. We hope to make sure we can procure any promising vaccines. Dr. K.K. Kwok, this third wave of the pandemic would give rise to this UCTP. Well, for this 6th of July, where the third wave breaks, there have been quite a long time that we have any cases. Well, and the exemption of the quarantine, after 1 month and 22 days, the Carrie Lam 83 deaths later, that claiming that the testing would not stop the virus. they should abolish this testing program. However, anyone dissenting will be called the so-called Dr. Even, be claimed to be against the government and the Central People's Government, which silenced the doctor. A few short questions for the Secretary. If you're not abolishing the exemption, what's the point of testing? For the UCTP, according to the expert, it only valid for 7 days. What happened on the 8th day? Third, after 83 deaths, and none of the public officers were willing to apologize. And Matthew Chung, for the 83 deaths, often they're the loved ones and the elderly, would like to apologize for the government blunders. And earlier on, we already clarified repeatedly that any claims or allegations of the exemptions causing, well, if not answered, I'll ask another question. Secretary, the exemption is vital. That means you're not abolish the exemption. What happened on the 8th day? Medically speaking, I must what happened on the 15th day? I already reminded you. Well, a chairperson. Okay, please don't interrupt. Secretary, which secretary? Department of Health? Director of Health? On the third question, would you apologize after 83 deaths? You already raised your question. I have the right to assign question to officer. You didn't have to help the government this much. Please stop. I need to maintain the order of the meeting and ensure that the public officers have sufficient time to respond. This is my duty. Please stop. Director of Health? For COVID-19 testing, that person, well, would not encounter virus at time of testing. To control the pandemic, wearing masks, maintaining social distancing, and seeing a doctor with slight and feeling unwell will still need to be upheld so as to effectively control COVID-19. Dr. K. Kwok, my third question, may I ask Matthew Chung, would you apologize? We already asked your question. Secretary, anything to add? Nothing. Frankie Yik. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members should stop heckling from the chair. Otherwise, I will issue a warning. Mr. Frankie Yik, Secretary, on the 18th of August, I've written to you a letter in which I listed out the proposed measures for the Anti-Epidemic Fund 3.0 on the transport sector. It take 11 pages, cover the air, land, and sea. Well, overall speaking, to have fair share a few common demands. First, the ESS. Of what I heard from colleagues, it makes some criticism. My sector have been very positive of this scheme and hope that you can extend it for another 6 months. And if possible, raise the subsidy cap from $9,000 to $15,000. And also to expand the scheme to cover those 65 plus without MPF accounts. And also to extend the principal moratorium for another 6 months. Well, I've been talking with HKMA and the banks, and we haven't heard anything yet. Third, hope the government will continue to exempt government charges, for example, business registration fees and license fees, and also the rent payments. And also urge the landlords to offer rent waivers and the management fee for 2 months. Hope the government can provide the subsidy for 2 months. Well, you see that on such a difficult time. Well, for the second round, we see the public transport patronage dropped by 40%. For third wave, the patronage dropped by 70%. The transport sector is hit very hard. What they all hope the government can launch the AEF 3.0. Besides extending all the cash subsidy scheme, they also hope that you can have some supplementary measures to ensure that those not covered in the past 2 rounds of AEF can get priority treatment. Well, due to the government administrative arrangements, some sectors not having any income. For example, the cross-boundary transport, we all know, for example, airlines, the passenger traffic, the Food and Health Bureau has seen that the pleasure boats as party room. And finally, we're able to get a subsidy on the pleasure boat owners. For example, the civil service away from home, that all the driver exam have become to a halt, and all the driver instructor not getting any income. And the first and 2 rounds are not covered by the AEF. Please let me finish. And for the cross-boundary transport drivers, we're not only subsidized in the first and second round. Well, they were not tested every 3 days. Otherwise, they weren't able to cross the border, even though the government have paid the testing costs. Well, we ran out of time. Mr. Yip Kin Yun. Secretary just now mentioned that please don't put politics above science. However, at the early time, the chief executive have used politics to attack some of the experts and scholars and doctors. Such approach have made some of them reluctant to speak out. That's quite horrible. I hope that the government could really uphold putting science before politics. You don't have to respond to that. The second question, as for the UCTP, the government have stressed it that it's purely voluntary. Will respect the decision made by the public. While for students and teachers, well, the government may deploy administrative means to pressure teacher or students to do something. For example, 3 years ago, on November, when Li Fei came to Hong Kong to give a speech, they give a live televised address. Well, it required the school sponsoring bodies to report on the number of students to ensure that the schools will show the televised address. Well, that was history. For UCTP, would you ask the school to report back to apply pressure on them, so to push the teacher and student to go through voluntary testing? Well, the answer is clear, Mr. Yip. That's voluntary. Well, for the UCTP, we're not pushing for numbers. We really want the public to test it out for themselves and for the others and for the greater community. So as Hong Kong can return to normal, so our students can go to classes and had a good time learning, because that's the whole purpose. Mr. Yip, anything to add? Mr. Chen Kin-bo, well, for yourself and others, you should support and take part in the UCTP. I also sign up right away. Well, the government to ensure that all the high-risk groups to be tested to make it valid. Well, the COVID-19 has been showing across the world. Even though if cases drop to 0, it may return after a year. However, the Hong Kong economy has been hit quite hard. I think the government should be prepared to fight the epidemic while keep maintaining the economy. You can't wait the cases drop to 0, as there will be a winter research. However, this is coming. We should prepare that we should restart the economy with low number of cases. Of course, there will be some changes. We should ensure there will be sufficient tracking, detection, and isolation and treatment. Well, suppose they should go hand in hand for the health code for boundary crossing. I hope the government should be ready. It's just not technically, also with sufficient quotas. For example, you expect that tens of thousands of people crossing the boundary so as to cope at those the sufficient quotas. If it's only for a few thousand, or not enough, there'll be great controversy.
查陳議員。
Chief Secretary, I agree with Mr. Chen totally. Anything else from other officials? No? Then next, please, Dr. Fernando Zhang. Thank you. Chief Secretary, 83 Hong Kong residents have passed away because of the epidemic. The majority of them are the elderly persons, and a good number of them were residents at residential care homes for the elderly. Now, for residential care homes for the elderly and the disabled, over 20 have seen infected cases, and over 200 residents have been confirmed infected, and among them, 25 have passed away. So we have seen a really severe outbreak this time. How are we going to avoid them from happening again? Now, you have done only 2 rounds of testing for staff members of these homes, and then you have not covered everybody. All experts have asked you to give an undertaking to do a test for staff of residential care homes every 7 days. When would you start doing it? And then you are starting this big drama about the universal community testing program, and then all experts are telling you it's a waste of time and money, and it's not going to serve much purpose, because after you do the test, people still move around, and then people could still get infected. So if you just do the test once, it doesn't serve any purpose. And then Carrie Lam actually complained that experts are smearing the program. Well, I think experts have made it clear. If, say, there is a false positive case, that is, someone actually is not infected, but then the test result is positive. Even if there's a 1% positive, a false positive cases, that means if you test 5 million people, 50,000 people would be tested false positive. When they are actually not infected, their test result will show they've been infected. And then you say there are some 5,000 silent carriers. You say there could be 5,000 silent carriers in the community, and then you put these 50,000 false positive together with the 5,000 infected silent carriers, and then there will be cross-infection. Isn't that a dumb way? You say you wanted to do it for the good of others and yourself. So would all of you, I want you to answer one by one. Are you going to ask all your family members to join the UCTP? Chief Secretary, I'll definitely encourage my family members to do so. I will actually ask them to make the appointment as soon as possible online, because it's really for protecting ourselves and our family members, for the good of the community. We want the community to resume normal soon. Why can't we do it? Because we cannot be sure if there is still transmission chain. If everyone is tested, and we can have some assurances, and then we're able to go back to school and work and whatever. He hasn't answered my first question. Chief Secretary, anything else from you? Well, that's a lengthy question. Can I ask Dr. Law Chi Kwong to give you a response? Now, we have put in much resources to deal with targeted groups for residential care homes for the elderly and the disabled. We have seen infected cases, so we are very concerned. And many elderly persons and people with chronic diseases lost their lives as a result, and we express our deepest condolences to the family members. Dr. Chow, I understand you have already made a submission, and the administration has responded to you in writing, so perhaps we could follow up on that later. Dr. Helena Wong. Now, the third wave of transition is definitely caused by errors made by the government in its prevention control policy. Now, there's been news report that the Secretary for Transport and Housing has agreed to give exemptions to air crews and sea crews, making change, or especially those involved in changes of crew in Hong Kong. So can I ask Frank Chen whether you're the one who suggested exemption for these groups to the government, and because of your recommendation, over a few dozen lives were lost, and do you think you could have a clear conscience in that? Chief Secretary. Well, actually, that's a collective decision of the government. As I explained, there's a need to offer exemption to air crews and sea crews, but since the 27th of July, we have tightened the policies. So would you agree, admit that this is because you made a mistake in the first place? Now, when you first offered exemption to these groups, have you ever consulted experts? That is, have you considered the scientific basis for making this decision? Well, actually, we consider many factors. We consider the international scenario and many, labor organizations, including international labor organizations, who issued appeals to different countries. For sea crews were especially affected. Many of them were stranded at sea for months because of the epidemic, and some of these sea crew members started to suffer mental illnesses. So we responded to an international appeal, especially because Hong Kong is an international shipping center. So these are appeals on humanitarian grounds. So in other words, you didn't listen to the advice of experts and scientists. So you said, okay, Hong Kong will do some good, we'll just respond to the appeal. Is that what it was? Maybe Mr. Frank Chen could answer. Yes, Mr. Frank Chen, please. Thank you, thank you, Madam Chair. About exempting, offering exemption to certain groups is a collective decision of the government as a whole. And after the arrangements, the decision was made, the relevant policy bureau and departments, and that includes colleagues of the Department of Health, have all referred to the advice of experts. So was it a recommendation from you, Mr. Frank Chen? Please allow Mr. Frank Chen to respond. Please be brief, Mr. Frank Chen. Well, we considered public health first and foremost. So we wanted to ensure public health protection, and then we've done a risk assessment. Then there was discussion on the relevant policy. At the end, we decided to implement the policy. Members asked whether this decision was not cautious enough. Do you have anything more to say to that? Madam Chair, I think on various occasions the government team has given clear explanation on that. At the time when we made the decision, we had to consider the epidemic situation at the time. As we considered public health protection, we also had to consider economic development and people's livelihood. So we need to consider all factors to make sure that that we could meet the various needs, and then we also pay close attention to the development epidemic, and then we adjusted our policies accordingly. So at the time, we did have regard to the epidemic situation, and then we responded immediately to appeals in relation to air crews and sea crews. So it wasn't a scientific decision then. I think you've used up your time, Ms. Chen Hao-Yan. Now, in the past month, we've seen many days with over 100 cases, and we had to wear a mask even when we were jogging. So this is a serious situation. I must appeal to the public to put public health first. Let's fight the virus together. Please put aside any political differences. Now, some members made criticisms about third wave of transmission. Mr. Frank Chen gave a reply on exempted persons. But apart from that, do you have enough data to tell everyone in Hong Kong and all members present here that is among all the infected cases so far, 40% of them have unknown sources of infection? That means there are still asymptomatic patients. So is it wrong, therefore, for the government to spend time and resources to do a universal community testing program? Why is that not allowed? Otherwise, how are we going to identify the asymptomatic patients? So I think worth it just to identify one asymptomatic patient. So I hope the government will use scientific evidence to tell members here that there are 40% of the infected cases with unknown sources of infection. That's important. And the second point, now apart from the universal community testing, there must also be testing for high-risk groups and targeted groups. And then, most of the deaths involve elderly persons, so you have to make sure that your testing is easily accessible. For example, mobile testing vans like mobile libraries. There are many elderly persons living in some districts such as Tai Hang West. So maybe you could have mobile testing centers, and then people could just go downstairs and they could get the test. And then can you have on-demand specimen collection teams? So you send mobile specimen collection teams like what the Red Cross does with blood donation programs. You can have these specimen collection teams going to different places on a rotation basis. And then we've been told that the health code system is all ready. But unfortunately, there's one thing that's not ready. That is, the public have to spend over $1,000 to do the test. So when the health code system is launched, people will still have to pay for the test. Can you make sure that the fee is reasonable? Finally, it's about Chunyang Estate. You're not making good use of all the units there. Now, there's a Lei Yinwen holiday camp, Cho Kong Tam holiday camps, and there are many other camps. Many of these camps are now under maintenance. But for Chunyang Estate, there are 1,700 units. Definitely, you can find some other places to replace Chunyang Estate. These are the grassroots residents. They've been, waiting, suffering delays after delays, and they cannot move in. I'll first take your last question. For Chunyang Estate, we've made it clear to prospective residents of blocks 1, 2, and 3, and we're able to return the units to them. But by the end of the year, when we have 2,500 new units in Penny Bay, then we're able to return Chunyang Estate to the housing department. And in the first quarter next year, people could move in. So can't you speed up the construction of the 2,500 units? Yes, we are speeding things up. We are working much faster than usual. Okay, next to Mr. Charles Mock. I'll try to be short with my questions, so I'll allow more time for the government officials to answer my questions. First of all, have you considered relaunching the elections again? Do you have any scientific and objective evidence to show that election is the most dangerous undertaking, so you can't do it, but you can resume anything else except elections? Actually, what if you do the elections in end of September, early October, and then push back the policy address by a month? That's not going to cause much impact, and that's the fairest and the most reasonable way. Now, many members talk about the health code, but actually, if the health code is, even if you take the test, you could get infected right afterwards. So this is a one-off test, this universal test. Well, it doesn't serve much purpose. You ask people to go and take the test, but soon the test results would mean nothing. I'm not talking about health code, rather, sorry. I'm talking about the Universal Community Testing Program, the UCTP. Many ask, with the test result of the UCTP, then can people again go back to the mainland or Macau? And then maybe people will only take the test depending on when they plan to travel across boundary. So all this doesn't make sense unless you keep doing the test every week. And if you are going to test everybody, why don't you give priority to the high-risk groups? So people are voicing opposition to scheme because they question whether the scheme it makes sense. Now, you're using mainland companies to do the test, and you said for the vaccine, you're going to join the Global Alliance to procure the vaccine. How come for testing you can't do the same? In other countries, at the Yale University or MPA, players saying that we just need saliva to do the test. Can't we go for a less invasive approach to doing the test. It will be more comfortable for the elderly. It's also safer and less troublesome. Why don't you allow yourself more choices? Hospital authority wouldn't just buy products from mainland in the past. So 3 questions. I'll take one question, and Professor Chen could take the other questions on healthcare issues. Now, the election and the testing are 2 separate methods. I'm not talking about testing. I'm just asking how come you wouldn't proceed with the elections. Now, you're asking how come we can do the test but not the elections. Now, with elections, we're talking about several million people coming out to vote. And then there are long queues at polling stations. There's a second point. A third point, before the election, there's need for electioneering. If there is a gathering ban of 2 persons per group, how can we do electioneering? So there are various factors to consider. And then the epidemic's not stable yet, so there are plenty of reasons, but I won't repeat them. Professor Chan, please. Now, about the universal community testing program, of course, is one-off. Because we test a large number of people, so we'll be able to identify the asymptomatic patients in a short space of time, and then we could achieve early detection, isolation, and treatment, and we could prevent the spread of disease in the community. So these are the important considerations. But this universal program is not going to replace the targeted group testing scheme that will continue. So maybe then I would decide when to take the test, depending on when I plan to travel to the mainland. Yes, your views heard loud and clear.
Tony Chair. Well, Hong Kong for the past year have been subject to many adverse elements. For example, the violence and now the COVID-19. The Hong Kong economy had slid. There's so much unemployment these days. In terms of improving public livelihood, the Anti-Epidemic Fund 3.0 was proposed to the Secretary. I'm supporting this. I hope they're able to help those in need. Or just because you spend $290 billion for the first 2 rounds of AEF, and now our fiscal reserve currently have $800 billion. While same for rainy days, $800 billion is still a lot of money. We're able to help the public to tide over this difficult period. I believe this is a high time to do more handouts. I hope that the government can be more generous with public finances. It's just a piece of my opinion. For fighting and preventing the epidemic, while the government have implemented a lot of measures, in terms of preparedness and facilities, the government is underprepared. And thank the central government's assistance, including the UCTP, which have my full support. As for the retrofitting, the construction of new facilities, for example, the new mobile hospital, while the Hong Kong construction sector have very high standards and very efficient. However, for building such infrastructure, we don't have much experience compared to the mainland. By leveraging their expertise, I hope the government can make use of tap into these opportunities so that our civil service team is able to learn from them. And also the companies, for example, the construction sector, were able to take part in it. So we can act the lessons so that in future we can enhance our rapid response. Would the government consider it? Chief Secretary. Mr. Chair raised a few questions. I'll ask the Tony Ko of HA and the Development Secretary talk about the mobile hospital or temporary hospital. Mr. Michael Wang, Development Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chair's question. I was at a press conference, and for building the temporary hospital next to AW World Expo, that would be built by the constructor currently in our contracted list Well, when we build a lot of quality facilities through the modular construction, we learned a lot. We'll continue to go forward with this. Mr. Tony Ko, FHA. Operation-wise, we'll learn and accumulate experience that will be helpful in future. Mr. Horace Chang. I have two questions related to the employment support scheme. Well, as we know, for the first round of ESS, well, the supermarket and the property management company were able to get the subsidy. And afterwards, there was a lot of backlash in the community. While during the pandemic, for example, supermarkets, I would say that they were doing incredibly good. I know that to disperse the money as quickly and to streamline the red tape, you decide to simple as possible. I understand and agree to it. And now, when it comes to the second round of ESS, the government is well aware if you offer more subsidies to the supermarket, it doesn't make sense. If you're only asking them to pay back the community with do so. In the past 3 days, the supermarkets claimed that will decide giving out goodie bags to help some targeted groups or hand out cash vouchers. There'll be some restrictions on the amount and the scope. We know that the money is not going back to the public. Why not? We just offer them the subsidy. For the property management companies, they're unwilling to pass on the subsidy to the owners corporated, or even if you fire the companies, they can make more money from the subsidy than by being appointed by the owners corporation. I think the government should consider how to handle it. Another ES problem. And last night, a doctor, I don't know him, at the first time he talked to me, I think he had been fair. At the beginning of this year, he set up his own clinic on February 27. He hired 6 staff, the probation period for 5 months, and then she opened the MPF accounts. Well, for the MPF accounts, well, on the 11th of May, they start making contributions. Under this scheme, that the snapshot was taken on the 7th of May of the contribution between 2019 to 2020. In other words, the system showing that they were 4 days late, thus he was ineligible for the first phase of the ESS. So, well, in this case, the society adapt to such hard policies or the other way around? Would you consider that while vetting applications, would the May 7 deadline be flexible? If there hard evidence that from last May to March have been making contributions, or for a second phase, would you consider extending this May 7 deadline for another 3 months? Secretary Lo Chi-kwang. Well, next week we'll start accepting applications for ESS Phase 2, Tranche 2. We will consider any room for refinement. Since we announced the ESS scheme in early April, for April and May, well, all of a sudden we see a surge of new company formations and a lot of companies opening up their MPF accounts. For us to screen out these probably non-bona-fide applications that involve high administrative costs, our decision was that we put the state off as past date. Well, at the worst phase of the pandemic, the companies who actually open at the hit of the pandemic, well, the property management company, the secretary can make the reply later. Mr. James Toh, 2 pieces of opinion. We see that the pandemic is gradually under control. The government should not postpone the election for a year. You should allow polling as soon as possible. Well, on the 6th of September, if the situation keeps improving, the public will see that you are using a political pretext to tinker within a year to come with a lot of legislation to distort the system. Second, after first and second round, learning from your experience, you should put the money into the public pocket. Well, that otherwise they will eliminate the problems raised by my colleagues, and also there's quite wrenching for them. For the UCTP, Universal Testing Program, assume there are tens of thousands of people getting tested. I believe that you will catch some silent carriers. So, using the percentage and how many you expect to detect at the same time, these silent carriers they probably be infected by queuing for testing. You can be risk of spreading the virus by people queuing. Well, if you couldn't catch a single case, or maybe those tested are safe, I don't know if we call it success or not. If you actually catch any cases, you're asking the silent carriers to infect others at the testing centers. Have the science expert raised to you. For example, let's say you allocate 1,500 silent carriers. Well, by having hundreds of people, 100,000 people queuing, how many would you infect? Have you done such analysis? Secretary. For expert opinion, I'll defer to the experts. First clarification, there were no queuing. They only make an online booking. You must make a booking online prior, and yet there were people gathering. Well, the crowd will be small because we'll book a big community hall instead of a small shop. For example, a school auditorium, football courts, and sports centers. We have done a risk assessment. Experts have looked into all of them, and the MSD have checked for air ventilation. So how many people would you infect it? Well, if you have fully prepared, you're not supposed to infect anyone. Let's say you catch 1,500 people. Well, in such a gathering, we claim that you'll be fall apart. Well, how many would expect to infect if they're not gathering only booking system? Well, Mr. James, let's say you can detect 1,500 cases, well, by queuing or not. So there will be zero infections according to them. I'll defer the expert on this. Department Director of Health. For the UCTP, will take infection control seriously. The CHP infection control office have also come with the recommendations, and also consult with the HA and the university experts, and also take reference with the infectious control disease guidelines. So there will be zero infections for the actual arrangements, and for the venue, the air ventilation requirement, also the queuing. Well, I know that already. Your time's up. So you think there will be a 0 or 1 infection. Have you done a risk assessment also minimize the risk of infection? Well, there's no point trying. What's your estimate there? How many would you actually get? We are 4 minutes and 30 seconds into it. The risk of infection, well, here have taken precaution to minimize it. Mr. Yu Shiwing. Well, it's been 7 months. The tourism sector, whether for inbound or outbound tourism, they've been having no income. People become hopeful to disappointed. Of course, the government have also been offered the first and second round of the AEF, but we won't know that if the money was still coming after November. What this sector is currently considering, they will not apply for the second part of the second round because they couldn't see the future. For the third round, the government should consider enrolling it as soon as possible. At least people will see some hope. Can it be launched by September? By October, then the electrical and the finance committee was on that will be filibuster are worried that it will probably be too late by November and able to be dispersed in time in December. Now the government promised that you can announce the details of AF 3.0 can convene a special FC meeting so that the holiday sector can weather this storm. And second question, and for the health code for Hong Kong, Guangdong, and Macau, for the cost of the health code, Hong Kong offer a very high quotation at the beginning is 1,000, currently is $600. It's still high. And if the mutual recognition of the health codes, can you fix the price at $100? That's the same as Macau and Guangzhou. Matthew Chung, thank you, Mr. Yu. We are as anxious as you and hope to attend the public rallies and hope that we can table the AF 3.0 to the Finance Committee. We are working in full steam and hopefully we can come up with a package within next month and be announced and apply funding from FC. Ready for end of this month. At this stage, we'll still how to achieve this deadline. For the charges for the health code, I know there'll be some changes. The trend is going downwards. Well, it just applies demand situation. I believe that this culture change is important. By then, if the health code will be ready, the charges situation will improve. Well, now answer my question. We hope that the charges for all three areas will stay the same at $100. If not, if you open up the boundary, it will affect a large group of people. So the government work towards it and fixing the price at around $100 so as to benefit more people. I hope that the price will be affordable. However, this is really a market-led. I hope you can work towards this direction.
Mr. Lau Kok-fan, thank you, Madam Chair. Now, in the early part of the epidemic, there's been demand for universal community testing, and they've asked the government to expand its testing capability. Now, later on, the government asked for assistance from the Central People's Government, and then now the CPG is giving us assistance in this universal testing program. So I think we should seize upon the opportunity to actively take part in the test from the 1st of September. Then we could rule out some asymptomatic patients. But then many do not know what's going to happen after the test, especially what about the health code. Now, because there's been smearing in the community, so people are not comfortable with the health code system, so the government needs to do more explanation. The health code could be for two purposes. Now the government is saying is to facilitate cross-boundary travel. But what I understand about the health code is that it's just about turning a health declaration into an electronic form. So if you go to a restaurant, a hotel, or the jockey club, they ask you to scan the barcode and you have to fill in a form with your personal particulars and give your health status. In other places such as Macau, it's just also the same thing of a health declaration turned into an electronic form. So there is this misunderstanding or smearing of the health code system. I think the government has to explain it properly. You have to do proper explanations for both the universal testing and the health code. But it seems the government is trying to evade from the issue. You're not trying to give explanations. The health code. Now, after we've done the universal test, now there are much rumors circulating in the community that as soon as it will be the 15th of September when we see the health code, or maybe in October, but we don't know if it's true. These are just words circulating. But can the government tell us when the health code system will be put in place after the universal testing program? Chief Secretary. We did take the initiative to make various clarifications. We don't wait as soon as there's smearing. We would immediately make clarifications to put right the message. health code. Well, we don't know when we can implement it. Whatever is reported in the news is not true. We have to wait till the epidemic stabilizes. The Guangdong province, Macau, and the central authorities all see it the same way as we do. But of course, we wanted to resume cross-boundary travel as soon as possible because it's been suspended for too long. Businesses are being affected and people are not able to see their families. But if the epidemic does not stabilize, the Guangdong and Macau authorities would not allow Hong Kong people to go there. So, because the mainland is trying very hard to prevent imported cases, so we have to put health first. You have to understand that. We have to, take measures on our own, and including actively taking part in the community the testing program, starting next week. Members? The Chief Secretary and 9 Directors Bureau, 1 Deputy Secretary, and various other government officials and the Chief Executive of the Hospital Authority are here to answer questions. So it's a strong team. Another 30 members have asked to speak. We're ending our meeting at 4:45. So what I plan to do is to try to allow members who wish to speak a chance to ask questions. If we could finish all the speaking rounds, and if we still have time, then I will deal with the 3 motions. Otherwise, I will ask the Chief Secretary and the relevant government officials to study members' motions and give a response later. Next, Mr. Leung Yu Chung. The Chief Secretary said that the virus knows no political stance. We all understand that, and we deal with the epidemic. There shouldn't be any preconceived ideas. Now, of course, no one wants to approach the epidemic with a political position. But then, if experts see things differently than the government, how come the government is resorting to political suppression to discredit experts? Now, some experts have said that we should first test the high-risk groups instead. It will be more effective. But then the chief executive said openly that they are trying to destroy the relations between Hong Kong and the mainland. So if that's not political smearing or political suppression, what is that? And then now you say we shouldn't be approaching the epidemic with a political position. In that case, have you advised the chief executive not to do so as she tries to manage the epidemic? That's the first question. Second question. In the Anti-Epidemic Fund 1.0 and 2.0, many job types are not covered, and they're suffering. Especially there are various educational group organizations or companies. They are suffering. They are not having any income at all. And I've written to the government to ask if these groups could be given, this sector could be given help in the third round. And then the Secretary for Education said it's nothing to do with us. You have to approach this, or the Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development, and I approached the CDB. They said I should go to the Education Bureau. So I don't know who. So they're passing the buck around. Now there are some kindergartens too, and I wrote to the Labour and Welfare Bureau because it's in charge of kindergartens. And then the bureau said, well, it's nothing to do with us, so we passed on your views to the relevant department. They never told us which department it was, though. Now, Chief Secretary, you said we should fight the virus together. How come the policy bureaus are passing the buck around? Is it because they all have political stance and they differentiate friends from foes? If we're not from the pro-establishment camp, they just ignore us. Is that what it is? Last Friday, I called the Commerce and Economic Development Bureau. I didn't call the secretary. I know he's busy. I called the undersecretary. I left a message for a whole week. I've never got a return call. So how do we fight the virus together like that? Third question. In the first and second rounds of the anti-epidemic funds, many industries and job types not covered. So how are you going to, give them assistance in the new round? Chief Secretary, a brief response, please. Well, it's hard to be brief with 3 questions, but I think I have to say this in all fairness to the chief executive. The chief executive never said that. Do you know that we are already testing the high-risk groups? There are hundreds of thousands of taxi drivers, staff members of residential care homes, and in the property management companies. We've been testing them. We've done over several thousands tests, and so definitely that is the view of the expert, and the chief executive view is seeing eye to eye with the expert. So don't put words in her mouth. The chief executive expressed or lamented rather that there are many in the healthcare sector calling on people not to take the test, and that's something we cannot accept. It has nothing to do with politics at all. Chief Secretary, you made yourself very clear. Perhaps the member could, can you promise that the relevant government official will make sure they approach the member? Yes, send me all the letters and I'll deal with it. Mr. Peter Shiu. Thank you. I know the government and everyone's been working very hard the past 6 months to fight the virus. Now, I've been in discussion with some directors of bureau, including Mr. Matthew Zhang. Thank you for talking to me. Now, many were able to, many who struggled, but they were able to make it through the first 2 waves of transmission. But in the 3rd wave, people really suffer, and there are many self-employed. They need your help urgently. Now, it doesn't matter how much assistance you give them. What is important is they're allowed to resume business, and so they could stand on their own feet. That is the most important. For beauty parlor industry, you allow them to do some facial treatment, and there are some 3,000 massage parlors. How come beauty parlors are allowed to resume but not to reopen, but not massage parlors? Now I'm going to pass on all the information to you, Chief Secretary. And they have come up with some package of measures to step up their anti-epidemic efforts. So this will give assurance to customers. Now, in the past, many industries have paid out of their own pocket to test their staff, but now we have this free test with the support of government and of the central people's government. So many industries saying that they're going to ask their staff to go take the test. So maybe you can give them some support so that it could be done more quickly. 3rd question. Many have said this. For the 3rd wave of transmission, it's because of the air crew and sea crew. They brought the virus to us. I think many in the community share the view. So my question for the government is that now there are 4 experts in the expert advisory panels. And expert advisory panel, that all of them object to the proposal to grant exemption to these groups. Chief Secretary, the 4 experts are the advisors of the chief executive. The chief executive holds meeting with them from time to time, but for air crews and sea crews, the decision is a pragmatic one. And when we see that people have expressed concern, we have taken steps immediately to change the measures. Now we have very stringent measures. If the vessels do not carry cargo to Hong Kong, or passenger vessels, if they just pass by, they're not allowed to call here. No, but if for 4 experts they're not opposed to such exemption arrangement, you don't need to take the blame all by yourself. Now, I'm not going to divulge the detailed discussions with experts, but I think we always put public health first. And of course, there's no longer a problem. There are still, isolated imported cases, but on the whole, we've managed to control imported cases. Ms. Alice Mack. Now, many members talk about measures supporting the salary class. Of course, we're not very happy at all about the ESS arrangement, that is the Employment Support Scheme. And many people are unemployed now. Many, if you ask them, they will tell you they want the epidemic to be brought under control. They want the economy to restart. So that's why our first priority has to be fighting the virus now. So what is the government doing to promote or publicize the universal community testing program? Last month, the FTU, Mr. Stanley wrote to the central authorities asking for support to boost our local testing capability so we are able to do universal testing now. After a few months, finally, we are able to do universal testing. But what has the government done in promoting the scheme and in educating the public? Do you just rely on Mr. Patrick Nip to come and say a few words or to show you a video? Is that enough? There are people in the community who, for political or economic reasons, well, actually money matters more, they are smearing this program. They are spreading rumors. Why can't the government firmly crush such rumors? How come you, Mr. Cheung, and your colleagues are not able to explain things clearly? Why can't you refute such rumors firmly? Now, today, there are still people criticizing the program. They criticize. Why did they criticize? Because some of you are able to point out the problems. Now, if you would never explain all the information clearly to the public, and you would not explain to the public why it is important to do the universal testing, why there is need to launch the health code and so on. Just now you heard colleagues from the opposition camp, they talk about the health code. From what they said that they don't know what the health code is about. They're talking about something else. So shouldn't you educate the public? In fact, you should educate members as well. Why aren't you doing that? We have two doctors here, Dr. Chen and Dr. Ko, and one doctor said that he won't be infected. That's why he won't take the universal test. Now, you are doctors too. If a patient or someone from the community tells you, because I don't take any sweets, so I won't have diabetes, I don't need a health check. So would you say that's right? Now, shouldn't you be using your professional expertise to crush these rumors and to clarify things? We're not saying that after we do the universal testing, then people could start to party. No, we must still follow the same prevention control measures to keep the epidemic under control. But why isn't the government refuting all these rumors?
We've done a lot of containing epidemic. Well, you see, every day we have a lot of government publicity as the ECTB committee next week. While the publicity is useless, we'll definitely try our best and ramp up our effort. Mr. Ted Hui, well, Secretary have heard of the anti-extradition. Besides worrying about personal safety, the privacy may be information will be sent to China through the health code. Would this become the universal testing or universal surveillance? That's the public way quite concerned. In the fifth paragraph, you mentioned, and consult the privacy commissioner fully comply with the privacy legislation. But the health information to the public, that could be converted into Guangdong Health Code and to the mainland health authorities. And our Hong Kong privacy commissioner have actually checked into the mainland health code computers, ensure that there be no personal info being leaked. If the information get exploited for political gain by other departments, will our privacy commissioner be aware of that, and how we intend to enforce the law? Secretary Hill will respond. Well, the document stated clearly that the whole testing have no political consideration. Please, we're not thinking too much into it. I'm talking about privacy. Well, from our perspective, our legislation will also consult the Privacy Commission. There will be full safeguards. Please answer my question. Have the Privacy Commission checked into the mainland health code servers? Well, would be authorization before it being used. Let's say I agree and I consent to it. While the mainland have the statutes governing them, well, would that be outside and within the ambit of Privacy Commission now? Well, that's put outside Hong jurisdiction. That means the Privacy Commission is powerless. Please stop interrupting me. Well, there's a consensus that information is purely for a boundary crossing. Mr. Alfred Secretary, while the Hong Health Code is just for boundary crossing, all the information being passed on to the health, the Macau authority is just a static information. A set in each, for example, a telephone number. Mr. Ted Hui, please stop speaking. Mr. Hui, please stop. With any potential abuse, I need to ensure the orderly conduct of the meeting. I must stress that all the information will be general information control information. Would that be subject to Hong Kong law? Well, the whole process would comply with Hong Kong legislation. Have you checked with the Minister of Risk if we can comply with the Hong Kong private legislation? Have you looked into it? Mr. Ted Hui, please stop speaking. Well, all the information passed on to Macau to the mainland would only with the government's consent. Well, means all the information will be sent to China. I'm going to ask have the Privacy Commission have actually looked into it. Well, you ran over time. Ms. Secretary said, the Privacy Commission have checked into the mainland health codes. They've checked into the flow of the Hong Kong Health Code in comply with the Hong Kong privacy legislation. Dr. Lo Wei Kwok. Madam Chair, while human lives are at stake, we should put the fighting the pandemic first. I appeal to everyone to support the UCTP. Well, on the premises of fighting the pandemic, we might come up with ways to resume our economy. If not, the public will be complaining. They'll probably be starving if not caught by the virus. While the numbers speak for themselves, unemployment is stayed at about 6%, or 6.1%. I believe it's due to the employment support scheme propping up. The construction sector unemployment rate continued to climb to 11.3%, and the unemployment rate at 8.0%. So that is one of the hardest hit sector. I hope that for the third round of the Anti-Epidemic Fund, you can introduce supplementary measures for some sectors who are in deep water and not benefiting from the first and second round, including the creative sectors, the 65-plus workers that don't have MPF accounts, while the construction sector have been loud and clear, even though the government as subsistence would help to address some of the problems, as long as they would like the projects to resume. I'd like to tell the Development Bureau how can you roll out more public works projects so that the construction company, big and small, can secure their jobs and livelihood, and how to facilitate the rollout of private projects. A lot of the private projects are more or less on hold due to the pandemic. I hope that you can answer this urgent question from the sector. Michael Wong. For the public works, let me be concise. We'd like to thank the legislature. As of the July, the legislature FC have approved 170 billion projects, and up to date, there are over 80 projects. We have already contracted out 40% of those. The remaining 40% already start tendering. The remaining 20%, we hope that they're able to award tender for the remaining 20-30%. Dr. Lo also mentioned the private projects. We hope to expedite the vetting, and also through Construction 2.0 to enhance their productivity, and also for talent training. Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Advice helped Project A will now increase from 2,000, and for the we'll have over 700 assistant positions. Mr. Alvin Young. Well, Secretary, for universal testing, the loyalist members claim there was smearing and rumor mongering. I know that the Chief Executive fully trusted WHO, and on the 31st of July have also been quoted the WHO Director General. However, WHO just claimed that massive testing is a waste of money and impractical, and advised that the resources spent on testing should be spent on those with symptoms. The Secretary can check on the RTHK news report at 1 something in the afternoon. Well, Professor Hao Young and Lopat Leung are these so-called experts. Well, the WHO expert, according to you, are they experts or really smearing or rumor mongering? Well, what are the government's justifications when the WHO sees that the universal testing as meaningless and waste of money? So, what and more reason to decide to go ahead with this exercise? I disagree this as impractical. Looking at our paper issued, there are 3 levels. First, the epidemiological testing, for example, at the outpatient clinic, also the private. That we call it the first phase or first line of defense. The second, we also have a targeted group testing. The tens of thousands, for example, taxi drivers and residential homes, or catering establishments, and property management and cleaners. These are at high groups. The third one, the community universal testing, so as to cut off the transmission chain. We have 30% cases are untraceable. Well, we're well aware of the WHO findings. For high risk group, we have our measures, and also the masses have another issues. While it's free, how you can come out to protect themselves, and also with sound justice basis. I defer to Sophie Chen. Not needed. Well, on the 10th of August, it that you claim to be 5 million two-part testing, and for Patrick Nip claims that there's no target. So, which version should we believe in? Sophia Chen, what I meant back then was looking at our testing capability. In this morning press conference, we mentioned this is a voluntary scheme. It's hard to estimate the numbers that will take part. However, we need to have this capability within a short time so that those who are willing will be catered for. Mr. Vincent Chang. First, I support this UCTP. I definitely will take part. I appeal those around me to take part because it offers some safeguards. Well, at the beginning of the pandemic, besides wearing masks, hope that they'll also add them testing. People want to know, especially for the hard hit areas, hope that there will be a cheaper way to give them the peace of mind. And on the front line, for example, those working in wet markets and also the retail sales will also need this safeguard. It will respond to community aspiration. Hope that the UCTP can be successful. Of course, I want and is smear. At the last time, the government, while responding to public, have launched some masks, and some claim this mask being ugly. Like that, you know what? Well, that's quite irresponsible. A lot of the grassroots actually not to wear masks for fear of being mocked, which make a waste of money. I think we should be responsible for their own remarks. I'd like to ask about the AEF 3.0. The unemployment rate is still high, and over 200,000 people lost their jobs. The Secretary mentioned for the ESS is underway. There are some good sides to it. And there are still shortcomings outlined by my colleague. For example, $5,000 for 3 months to keep them on payroll. That is not far from ideal. And the secretary may be willing to launch employment assistance or to offer on-the-job allowances. You keep telling people that the method work out will involve a large amount of money. Well, you offer $6,000 a month. Now that we have these 200,000 people for 3 months, about over $3 billion compared to $80 billion with the ESS. That's not much money. However, you are offering direct assistance. Secretary just said that you're worried that they'll continue to stick to the unemployment allowance and not within a job. We can put some restriction. For example, we can give them on 3 months, or the unemployment rate drop to a certain percentage, it will stop. Then the secretary consider rolling out unemployment assistance. Unemployment assistance. Professor Lachikong, would you consider? Will seriously study any proposal? Well, the problem ways have been responded in the past. We continue to work on that. Any follow-up, Mr. Chair? I'm not happy with Mr. Law's answer. You claim that you have lots of reason against it. Would you actually do the math? Because you are launching AEF 3.0, can you really do the math? What is the government consideration that prevent you from launching it? Can you tell the public that you actually have to help the unemployed?
Secretary, why is it that you wouldn't consider this now? Madam Chair, the government keeps listening to views and will keep exploring various possibilities. It's already 4:30. I informed members that earlier that I would exercise my discretion as the chairperson to extend the meeting by 50 minutes. Mr. Poon Siu Ping. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, in the third wave of outbreak, there are many cases with unknown sources. So there are probably silent transmission chains in the community. And then experts have expressed concern that there could be a fourth wave in the winter. So it's important that we achieve early identification, early isolation, and early treatment. Experts believe that if we have universal testing, we could identify the silent carriers and cut the transmission chain. So therefore, I support the universal testing program. I will start from the 1st of September. The government is going to give free tests to members of the public. I'm going to take part in it. I hope others will too. But then I've heard some concerns expressed by workers. That is, if they are tested positive, they will be isolated and be treated, and then it will affect their livelihood, and also the family members will be affected. So what measures are there to encourage workers to take the test and address their concerns? What if they are tested positive, they can't work, then would you give them any subsidy? So do you have specific measures that could address the concerns of workers? And then, of course, people are having a hard time finding work or keeping their job already. Are there measures to promote recovery of the economy? Now, many mentioned the APEF 3.0. When will it be rolled out and what will it cover? Thank you. You said if workers are tested positive, they can't work. Well, what will happen if they have any financial problems? Of course, our colleagues will see what can be done. But if people are tested positive and then we pay them compensation, it will be impossible to do that. But of course, if they do experience difficulties because they have to go into isolation and they need someone to take care of children and so on, definitely we will do something. We won't just leave them be. Economic recovery, when can we push that? I think it depends on the epidemic. We are adopting a suppress and lift strategy. As you know, today already we are relaxing certain measures. Cinemas and beauty parlors are allowed to reopen. There are also some outdoor sports venues that are reopened. And then starting from today, dining services are allowed till 9 p.m. So we are doing it gradually to take things forward. But I think first and foremost, we have to consider public health and safety. And secondly, we have to see if our economy could cope. We can't keep the city shut for a prolonged period. And the third factor is public acceptance. We are already seeing pandemic fatigue in the community. So it's not easy to make any decision, but we have to look at the situation at the time. So I hope you understand that. We are trying to strike a balance among these three factors so we could take Hong Kong forward. At the same time, we could ensure public health. Mr. Kenneth Leung. Mr. Cheung, you said if we do a good job fighting the virus, then our economy could be relaunched. Yes, we're spending much resources in fighting the virus. When Mr. Paul Chan delivered his budget this year, I already expected our deficit to be no less than $300 billion. And we're told now it will be about $270 billion. Now, I've been looking at the latest consolidated account prepared by the Treasury. Now, we are 3 months in the first quarter of the new financial year, we have a deficit of $108.9 billion. If we just use some straightforward extrapolation, then this year's deficit could be $470 billion. So that's multiplying $108 billion by 4. Now, Mr. Cheung, you talk about relaunching the economy. I'm worried before we relaunch our economy, we'll be left out. Just 2 days ago, one of the largest wealth management company, Vanguard, is saying that it's ditching Hong Kong as its base. It's going to Shanghai. It's not doing any more ETF business here. So, Mr. Cheung, when you talk about relaunching our economy, you're talking about just internal consumption. But do you really have anything up your sleeves? Do you have any policies in place so we don't have to wait till the epidemic is gone before you could relaunch the economy? I haven't heard anything. You're just talking about doing something locally. I'm worried that by 2022-23, let's say we have a deficit of $300 billion again, and then by 2020 to 23, if there are no other new factors, then it's possible in that year we would have almost exhausted all our fiscal reserve. Chris, yes, thank you for the question. Well, extrapolation may not be right because the revenue may come later on, so it's not right to do extrapolation. That's the first question. Second question. Apart from making savings, how do we bring in more revenue? Well, that's exactly something we're working on. From the financial point of view, there are two aspects. One is we have to make the pie bigger, so we bring in more IPOs, and then we want more people to put their assets here in Hong Kong. And the other is the partnership. Now, some funds have actually made inquiries. They're interested to put their PEs in Hong Kong, so that's about making the pie bigger. And the second question is about if the funds are here, what sort of products are they going to buy in, and how do we revive the economy? Maybe the MSI futures, they will be here, and then what other products? So this is something working on. Thank you. Mr. Ma Fong Kwok, Deputy Chairman. On the 11th of August, I wrote to the Chief Secretary. I made inquiries about the self-employed in the sectors I represent and what assistance the government is giving them. And finally, this morning, I got a reply. Now, my own assessment is that for the sectors I represent, there are about 100,000 self-employed persons, and less than 40,000 of them have received assistance of $7,500. But they started facing All these difficulties in January, schools were suspended, venues were closed. So we're just talking about $7,500 for 10 months. How are they going to survive on that? Maybe in the next 2 to 3 months, they will still be getting no income. And this figure of 40,000 is what you gave us. But as I told you, there are some close to 100,000 self-employed in my sectors. There are some involved in performing arts, and there are many, freelancers in the sector and so on. Musicians and so on. I've been asking the Commerce and Economic Development Bureau about them, but I haven't got any response. Now, for the upcoming AEF 3.0, how can you help people under that scheme? And then there are also sports coaches. About 8,000 people or so have received assistance, but the government's only spent half of your budget, $63 million, and you still have $50 million to give out. Now, what if these are coaches not recognized by the NSAs, but they've been in the business for a long time? How come they are ruled out? Why aren't you giving them assistance? The government actually has set aside a budget for the scheme, and you're not using up everything yet. You're close to $140 million yet to be dispersed. So why is that the case? And for the AEF 3.0, how are you going to help those who have only been given $7,500 the last 10 months? We're trying to see how we could help these people, but it's actually rather complicated. I've said this a number of times. For the $10,000 cash disbursement scheme, it should help them to some extent. Of course, it's not a lot of money. $7,500, of course, cannot last anyone 10 months. It probably won't even last a month, but we see what we have to find a way to work out the right mechanism. Are there any organizations that can help us there? This is important, so we could explore it further later. But you have the money. You have $130 million unspent. And then for the Film Development Fund, there's $1 billion. It's not been spent yet. How come you can't use the money? I don't get it. Maybe Mr. Bernard Chan, Deputy Undersecretary for Commerce and Economic Development, could give a brief response. While we're running out of time, perhaps you could follow up with Mr. Ma after the meeting. While we're running out of time, the last member to speak is Dr. Pierre Chen. Thank you. Paper number CB 1460, bracket 01. The health code system. Hong Kong health code system. I understand the government is trying to launch the health code. Paragraph 5 of the paper, there's an explanation of the arrangement. That is, after downloading the Hong Kong health code, the applicant can apply to convert the information of the Hong Kong health code to the Guangdong or Macau health code. That's the Yurkan code or the Macau health code. And during the application conversion process, the applicant must express his explicit consent to provide his personal information and nucleic acid testing result to be transferred to the health code system of the Guangdong and Macau authorities. Now here in the paper it says relevant personal information. What sort of information is that? Is that the name, the photo, passport number, or what? What kind of personal information is that? Who's to respond, please? Is name, ID card numbers, the basic information. I'm not basic information. I'm asking specifically what is the relevant personal information. Well, that's in paragraph 6 of the paper. There's 5 pieces of static information, and that includes name, gender, date of birth, travel document number, and contact and phone number. So the 5 usual pieces of information for immigration control. And because it's a health code, so there will also be information on the name of the testing institution and the testing results. So 7 items of static information. Thank you. And next question then. You said you have consulted the privacy commissioner, and the arrangement is entirely in compliance with the relevant requirements. So the process, does it mean that it's for the applicant to apply to convert information, right? So it was asked earlier on, how could the privacy commissioner make sure that the systems outside of Hong Kong, that is the Yuekang code or the Macau health code system, how can you make sure that their processing is in line with the privacy requirements of Hong Kong? Now, the privacy commissioner will have regard to the personal data privacy ordinance and check if the process in Hong Kong is secure enough to make sure there's protection of personal data. And a point was mentioned that's the most important now. It's for the applicant to decide on his or her own whether to convert the information of the Hong Kong Health Code to the Guangdong, to the Yuekang or the Macau Health Code. Of course, when for the information to be converted, the applicant will know exactly what the information is, and it's for the applicant to decide whether to apply for the conversion. Okay, yes, so it's for the applicant to decide to apply, but if it doesn't decide to do so, then there's no way we could do it. Yes, there has to be consent from the applicant before there could be conversion. Thank you. That's it's already 4:45. I would like to thank our members for coming to the meeting. I would also like to thank the Chief Secretary for administration and all the relevant government officials for coming to the meeting. 34 members have had a chance to ask questions. Can I ask the government to help here? And many members have put forward questions and suggestions. Please consider them carefully. And some have asked for follow-up after and written reply after the meeting. So, Chief Secretary, please make sure the relevant government officials will liaise with the relevant members or provide the required requested document. Now, we are out of time, so we're not able to deal with the three motions submitted by members. Perhaps I will ask the Chief Secretary to ask the relevant government officials to liaise with members so that their views are fully considered. Finally, I would like to thank members for coming to the meeting. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much.